Hello everyone, Randy Harrington here. This video is a presentation by Lloyd, and the reason I am putting this video out is because of the previous video that involved Jason Valenti. Now, Jason was influenced by Lloyd, he knew Lloyd, and he helped edit Lloyd's book, the book that's discussed in this presentation. I own the book and it is fantastic. So this video is in reference to the Jason Valenti video that had his sighting in Florida and how it altered the course of his life. And Lloyd Pye was instrumental in guiding him in the beginning. So enjoy the video.
Book 1, Everything You Know Is Wrong, Human Origins. And he's one of those few rare, extraordinary people that has been invited back to repeat. And after you see and hear his presentation, you'll begin to understand why. He's a friend at this point. He really is. And he's an awfully good man, and he's got a brilliant mind, and you're gonna love this presentation. He's a native of Louisiana. He is a graduate of Tulane University. He has a BS in psychology. He's been a writer for over 25 years, and he's been a thinker for a lot longer than that. Ladies and gentlemen, Lloyd Pye.
So what we're going to do is just start right in with the human origins, in as much as the book is about human origins, and we'll go from there. All right, can we have the first slide? This is what we're all told is how we began as human beings, that we came out of the primordial sludge and step by step evolved into what we are today. Everything in that chain up to us is eat, survive, reproduce. We are, what's it all about? We have that incredible ability to say and think, what's it all about? How'd that happen? That's what this is going to be about. What we're told is, of course, that we're a natural flow of things, and that with this guy right here, we share a common bond that begins between 8 and 5 million years ago. 8 and 5 million years ago. Reason being, we know that we have upright walking primates of some kind or other at around 4 million years ago. So they just jack it back and figure if we're upright walking at 4, we probably split from a common ancestor with the down on all 4 apes between 8 and 5 million years ago. We know we were upright walking at 4 because we have proof of it at 3.5. Next slide, please. These are the famous Laetoli tracts of Tanzania, Africa, discovered by Mary Leakey and her team in 1978. And here you see what they are. We're in solidified ash. We have a large pair here, smaller pair here. We assume it was a couple moving along. And we see the track here in a blow-up is not quite human. It's different in several ways, but it's human enough to make it very clear that we have upright walking bipedal creatures 3.5 million years ago, no doubt, measured by ashfall, which is very accurate. So that's why we jack it back. If we were this upright at 3.5, we had to be upright at around 4, and that's where you get your dates of 5 to 8 million years ago, the split from the common ancestor. All right, now, next slide, please. Here's the depiction of how this happened. The nearby volcano laid out a layer of ash. The creatures go walking along, leaving their tracks. Then another layer of ash comes, seals the layer, and then 3.5 million years later, a rivulet comes through here, cuts through, exposes one of the tracks. One of Mary Leakey's team sees it, and then they peel back the layers until they expose the whole thing. Miracle piled on miracle. It's just amazing, an amazing discovery. Now, the reason I show you this is I want you to notice that all pre-humans that you will see in the books, and go back and you can check, they will show you a head that looks like this one pretty much, grossly primate in its characteristics rather, because that's what the skulls of all pre-humans look like. But then they'll always stick these human bodies underneath those heads. And this is a subtle brainwashing that is performed on all of us to make us think that these are in fact pre-humans, because that's what they're called. That's what anthropologists call them, pre-humans. Now you can't pretend that those heads are in any way human, so they don't, but they leave the body parts looking, you know, amazingly human. You have the hands coming down mid-thigh, and you know, I hate to say it, but God, this looks a lot like my body right there. Point is, we're all being misled by these depictions, and notice them continually. It's the way I'm telling you. Now, next slide, please. Lucy is very famous. Everybody should know her story. Lucy in the Sky with Diamonds, 1974, Afar Valley, Ethiopia, discovered by Donald Johanson and his team. She is the first of the so-called pre-humans. They are the Australopithecines, and she is one of the first types. Now, what we know from her is a remarkable amount, because we have 40% of her body recovered. With mirror imaging, that gives us 80%. So much more than any other fossil at the time. It was just amazing. So we know a lot about her. She stood about 3 feet 6 inches to 3 feet 8 inches tall. Very diminutive relative to us. But her bones, all of her bones, are much more robust than ours. Her upper arm bone here, for example, which is much longer than ours would be if it was a human that size. This arm bone it would end about right here. Also, it would be about that thick. So we can see she's much more robust than we are in all of her dimensions. She has the head of a chimpanzee, which we cannot tell from her skull, as you can see, but from others like her. Head of a chimpanzee. But we do know that she walks upright because we have her hip joint and her pelvis, and we have particularly her knee joint, all of which are amazingly human. So we know she walked upright, no question about it. She was an upright walking creature. Just didn't have bones that looked anything like ours, or a head for that matter. Now, one other thing I want to point out about this is the people that are paid to go out and find these fossils, these pre-human fossils, are paid to find pre-human fossils. So what they do is they fudge it every way they can to make them look human, and they always have problems with the arms. Because all the arms of the pre-humans are too long from here to here, from shoulder to elbow relative to us. So if you'll notice, what they did is they fudged this way up beyond where it ought to be to get this up here, so they could get the fingertip down around mid-thigh, when in reality it belongs down around here. Keep these little tricks in mind. This is all part of the subtle brainwashing campaign that is waged against you to make you believe that they're telling it to you straight about how this all happened. Okay, next slide. All right, as I said, these are the first 4 of the Australopithecines, and Lucy is one of the first kind, Australopithecus afarensis. We have Africanus, we have Robustus, we have Boise. All right, we have basically a pair of upright walking chimpanzees, upright walking gorillas. You can see that, length of face, width of face, and sagittal crest, which modern gorillas have. It's that ridge of bone where their muscles attach to the tops of their heads. So from 4 million years ago to approximately 2 million years ago, we have a pair of upright walking chimps, a pair of upright walking gorillas, and that's it. Okay? Now, at 2 million years ago, we have a transformation. We are told it is a transition, that somehow the Australopithecines segued into the next creature, which is Homo. Homo meaning man. You will see they are indeed more man-like than are the Australopithecines, which are clearly primates, upright walking primates. So, we have this changeover from Australopithecines to Homos. We're told that it is a transition, it is a transformation, as you will see with this slide. Next slide, please. Okay, here we go. Australopithecine, early Homo. Notice, if you will, this is not a transition. This would require 20 or 30 gradual changes to get in from this to this. It is an overnight change. It is just sudden. Boom. The homos are here. I don't mean that like it sounds. Okay, next slide. All right, the homos are here. Here we go. The Homo habilis, Homo erectus, Homo archaic, Homo neanderthal, and then Cro-Magnon, Homo sapiens, us. And going back and through the Australopithecines, don't look anything like us. Nothing. Here we sit right here. Another transition. Now remember, we had 4 million years Australopithecines, approximately 2 million years. There's some overlap in here. And then here, 120,000 years ago only, boom, here we are. Suddenly, overnight, looking nothing like anything that has come before. The bones of all of these creatures are much thicker than ours, just like Lucy's were. And in every way, the shapes are dissimilar. They do not have, it's hard to tell looking straight on, but they have no foreheads. Their foreheads go straight back off their huge brow ridges, neither of which we have. We have nice forehead here. We have no brow ridges. Huge, round, nocturnal vision eyes. So did the Australopithecines. These are primate eyes. Primates have this kind of eye. Huge, wide nasal passages indicating a big, flat nose spread across the face. We've got our little uplift of bone sticking our nose off our face. We have rectangular, small, reduced eye sockets. Very poor night vision. A dramatic change has occurred. The upper jaw sticks off the face. Ours squished in. Nothing like us. Next slide, please. Profiles show the degree of change is startling. Prognathous mouth, no chin. Prognathous mouth even more so. No chin, and then suddenly flat mouth, nice chin. Look at the change through here. Australopithecine, Homo erectus, Cro-Magnon. This is as big a leap from here to here as from here to here in anatomical terms. A light year. A light year. This is not a transition. These are transformations, despite what you are told by anthropologists. Next slide, please. Now, am I making it sound my way just because the heads go that way? No, let's look at a whole body. This is a Homo erectus called the Lake Turkana boy. Homo erectus, Lake Turkana boy. Now, notice, if you will, this guy's about 12 years old. His molars have not erupted yet. He already stands 5'8". He's going to grow to 6'6", maybe 7 feet in adulthood. We don't know how they grew. But already at 12 years old, he is a physically robust creature. Every bone in his body at 12 years old is far more robust, thicker, stronger than any bone in Arnold Schwarzenegger's body today. True. Now, why do you, notice too, if you will, the length of his upper arm. And he has some shoulder socket here, so they had to put it in the right place, so that forced them to put the fingertip pretty near where it belongs. It belongs a little bit lower, but pretty close. Now, what are bones like this all about? What's the deal here? Why are they so robust? Your bones are a function of the torque your muscles can generate. Your bones have to be able to withstand the pressure that your muscles can generate. And if not, your muscles would break your bones. So when you're looking at bones like this, you're looking at an incredibly powerful creature. What are you looking at? You're looking at primate bones, primates of the earth. This is how the primates are built. Gorillas, chimps, right on down the line. They are incredibly strong relative to us, are the primates. 5 to 10 times pound for pound. They can come, they'll come right out of the mother's womb, reach up, hands and feet, hook onto her belly, and she walks off. And they can hang on. Anybody's had a pet monkey knows what I'm talking about. Next slide. Okay, this is a chimpanzee, minus its hair due to disease, so you can see the musculature in here. And the strength of these things is amazing. Amazing. You could take a male chimp like this, not a gorilla, and put it in a room with Mike Tyson. It's a battle to the death, and they both understand that. 2 or 3 minutes, this chimp is walking out. Now, he may be missing an ear or two. But the chimp is walking out. The chimp can tear him limb from limb, literally, apart. Understand that. Primate strength is nothing at all like human strength. Next slide. Same thing for Neanderthals, our supposedly closest nearest kin until just recently. Neanderthal fingertip bone, human fingertip bone. Segment of Neanderthal thigh bone, human thigh bone. Look at the difference. Not even close. This is quarters to dimes, shovel handles to broomsticks. No comparison. Our supposed, and we used to be told, absolutely, they insisted, they swore. We came directly from those guys. Even looking at this kind of evidence, that is what they insisted. Why? Because they have to explain it in terrestrial terms. Understand that science is hamstrung. They've painted themselves into a corner. They have to explain everything in terrestrial terms. They do not allow for outside intervention, whether that outside intervention is extraterrestrial or divine. And so they have to come up with explanations like this to suit the data, which doesn't at all support their conclusions. Okay, next slide. All right, here's the drawing that shows it a little more accurately what the pre-humans are vis-a-vis the humans. Notice that in the drawings the hands are down pretty much where they belong relative to ours. Also notice the rib cages are the upside down funnels of primates in the pre-humans as opposed to ours. What's the situation there? Well, you can't tell it very well from here, but all of the pre-human heads are stuck on their bodies like that, the way primates are. Their heads are down in on their shoulders. Only we have that elevated neck sticking our head up off of our torso. They also have that extra arm length and that extra power, and so they need a bigger fulcrum up here to wing their arms and do what they have to do. So all of that extra muscle mass plus the head torque down in there squeezes out the room, and so you're going to get that pinched off triangle that primates have. And we, with our shorter, lighter arms and lighter bones, we don't need all that muscle mass, and we got our heads sticking up, so we have a completely different rib cage. I want you to understand that. Now, the main thing to understand here is there is not a single human bone in the so-called pre-human fossil record. The main thing I want you to understand, there's not a single human bone in the so-called pre-human fossil record. And guess what? Anthropologists will not argue the point with you. An idiot can see it. An idiot can see it. All you got to do is point it out to them. Well, they know that. So they say, you're right, you're right. There's not a single human bone in the pre-human fossil record, even though we insist that these are indeed pre-humans. The reason we can get away with this is because we're going to put somebody right in here that's going to show a transition between these guys, and that is the missing link, the famous missing link. You've all heard about that. This is what it is. This is the thing that's going to stand right in here and miraculously show a smooth transition from this to this. Well, I tell you what, if the missing link was here today, he would need about 20 or 30 cousins standing right beside him, showing enough gradual transition to make this plausible. You don't just get one missing link. You need dozens to make this theory work of gradual transition, the Darwinian paradigm. And they don't even have so much as a fingernail, not a fingernail, of the missing link. Which leads us to conclude that Charles Darwin is a blowed-up peckerwood. However, they will not concede that fingernail that's missing in that direction. Darwin's still intact, everything's still okay. Missing link's going to show up. It's been 140 years, not yet, but he will show up. Okay, next slide. All right, the throat thing, I want you to get that clear in your mind. Notice, if you will, this is a standard primate throat, and of course this is our throat. A complete redesign, complete. Not least of which is the fact that they can breathe and eat and swallow and drink at the same time and not choke. We, of course, you know what happens when we do. The peas come out of our nose when we start coughing. Okay, so the point is that primates with this kind of throat can make tremendous amounts of noise. Anybody's been to a monkey house or, you know, at the zoo, you know what I'm talking about. Hoops, hollers, screams, howls. They know no limits. They can just puncture your eardrums, some of them, howler monkeys particularly. But they cannot do the thing that we can do, break those sounds into little bitty pieces. It's called modulating. They can't modulate. They can't speak. And try as we might to teach them to speak, and we do. You know, Coco, they've been working for her, what, 20 years now? Up to maybe 3,000 words. You could put her in a third grade class and she could probably be valedictorian. But she can't speak. She can't speak, and she's never going to be able to because she doesn't pack the gear, as they say in the military. She doesn't pack the gear and never is going to. No primate is. We are completely different and completely special because of it. Next slide. All right, now, so here's what we're left with. This supposed smooth transition right on through from the early ones to the later ones, including this. Now, you can see, I hope, that all that's really happening here is the brains are getting bigger. And it's harder to tell because the Neanderthals and the archaics, their brains are expanding back here in what's called an occipital bun. But they're getting bigger every step of the way. It surprises most people to find out that Neanderthals had bigger brains on average than we do. 1,500 cc to 1,400 cc. Bigger brains than we have, Neanderthals. We shrunk somehow and got so much smarter. Figure it out. Point is that we're told that all these guys went extinct at 30,000 years ago because that's when we see the last Neanderthal. It's when we find the last Neanderthal fossil, 30,000 years ago. Okay, so they went extinct and that's it, and we're left behind. We were told for a very long time that we appeared at 30,000 years ago. That Cro-Magnon appeared right as the Neanderthals ended, so it was a real nice fit. You know, we appeared somehow, we killed them all, and that was it. Transition, we took over the lease, and that was it. So, the reality then later proved to be that these guys existed at least 120,000 years ago. These guys existed down into 30, so you got this huge overlap of nearly 100,000 years where they're living basically side by side on the planet and not killing each other off. So that one kind of went out the window, so they said, all right, so we didn't evolve from the Neanderthals, we evolved from the Homo erectus. You saw the Lake Turkana boy and how much we look like him. We evolved from him now. That's the new theory. Okay, you can see the problem. Now, did this really happen? Did they all go extinct? Well, why would they go extinct? No natural predators. Meanest dudes in the valley. They can take a lion on head to head and tear it apart. That's how strong they are, and that's how big they were. So what would make them extinct? Could we do that? Yes, we could. We are vicious little buggers. We are smart. We hunt in packs. We are pack animals. We're hyenas. We're two-legged hyenas. And we have a savage territorial imperative. Together, we could kill any of them. One-on-one, they just pop our heads off like a pimple. Understand that. So, given that, what if what we did was instead of driving them to extinction, we just drove them where they don't make fossils anymore? What if that happened? Is that a plausible scenario? Let's take a look at it. All right, let's look at the Earth first, where these guys will live in. The Earth is divided into ecological niches. Ecological niches. You have the prairies, the savannas, the grasslands, the lightly wooded areas, primo niches. That's where everybody like us would like to live. You know, it's comfortable. The not so nice niches are the heavy, deep, dense forests, jungles, swamps, bad places like that, where we kind of live on the edges, but we don't really live in the heart of darkness. We think we do, but we don't. So, what if these guys lived in the primo niches, which they did because they were leaving fossils? And guess what? You leave fossils in the primo niches, in the prairies, savannas, grasslands, lightly wooded areas. Why? Because it's very unique that a fossil gets formed of this kind. because you have to die in very specific circumstances. You have to get caught in a flash flood so that your body is washed away, covered up by mud, so predators can't get you. Your flesh rots off, the minerals leach into your bones, and you become stone and you become a fossil. Or you get killed at the water hole. One day you're really tired, you're really hot, you're not paying attention, you go down to drink, the lion jumps on your back, kills you right there at the edge of the water hole, and then the wildebeest herd comes up behind him, run him off, stomp you down into the mud, and now same process. You're covered by mud, your flesh rots off, your bones are, the minerals leach into your bones, and you become a fossil, and that's it. And that's pretty much it. It's very hard to form a fossil otherwise. And so we see how miraculous that process is just to make them in the first place, and then millions of years later it washes up, or whenever it washes up, and somebody sees it that knows what it is and can recognize it and can save it. It's miracle stacked on miracle. That's why they're so few and they're so rare and they're so precious, because of that. Now, understand this, that in the deep woods and jungles of the world, they don't make fossils. Doesn't happen. You get your water out of the environment. You don't have a water hole. You get out of your food and things like that. It will surprise you to know that there is not, to this day, a single solitary fossilized bone of a chimpanzee in the world that we know about. They just don't make fossils. So, instead of them all going extinct, why don't we just postulate that they lived in the primo niches? This guy arrived sometime prior to 120,000 years ago when he starts leaving fossils. And he issues an eviction notice to all of these. Get out of town. We're here. We're taking over. And they do. And there'll be some skirmishes. They'll kill a few of them. And these guys, you know, they're not that stupid. They'll figure it out. These guys are bad news. We got to move. And because they're adapted to the planet, we've seen the millions of years they're here. They're adapted to this place. They can go pretty much anywhere they want to, and so they do. They just walk until we don't chase them anymore, and that's into the deep woods and the jungles of the world. And if that scenario is true, and I postulate that it is, then it would explain the hundreds and thousands of stories that we have from around the world of what? Upright walking, hair-covered creatures living in the deep forests and jungles of the world, every continent except Antarctica. The hominoids. It explains the hominoids. You with me? Okay, next slide. Let's take a look at a hominoid. Here we go. This is a statue of a Bigfoot Sasquatch type, carved Willow Creek, California. This gentleman's about 5'7". I'm 5'11". You can figure that if that thing was here, his head would be up about right here. Okay? There are 4 kinds of hominoids. 4 kinds. We know of 2 in the West primarily. Sasquatch Bigfoot, this kind. Abominable snowman Yeti. And then there are 2 other kinds that are dominant in other parts of the world that we don't know very much about. The Almas and the Agagwis. Okay, now we're going to go over them. They're pretty much the same except for size. All right, the Bigfoot Sasquatch kind, as you see, 7 to 10 feet tall, 700 to 1,000 pounds on average. The giants, the big ones, the ones you hear the most about. The Abominable Snowman Yeti, man-sized, 5 to 7 feet tall, 300 to 600 pounds, lives exclusively in the Himalayan ranges as far as we know. Taken together, those 5 ranges are as big as the United States, plenty of room to roam, but they are not on all continents. The Bigfoot Sasquatch kind is. The third kind, Almas. The Almas. They are found primarily in the mountains of southern Russia and western China, the Pamirs and the Caucasus, and the Altais and the Tian Shans. But they are also elsewhere in the world, including in the United States. Man-sized again, 5 to 7 feet tall, 300 to 600 pounds. Fourth kind, the Agagwis, about 4 feet tall, weigh about 200 pounds. The pygmies of the group. All right? Now you might remember, ironically, there were 4 Australopithecines, 4 early Homos, and what a surprise, there are 4 types, basic types of hominoids. Interesting, isn't it? Now, what they are is this. The Bigfoot Sasquatch kind live in what is called lower montane forests. Now, in mountainous terrain that are covered by trees, and if you've done any flying in the Pacific Northwest, you know what I'm talking about, the lower trees are called lower montane. As you go up, you get into upper montane. The Bigfoot Sasquatch lives in the lower montane. The abominable snowman lives in the upper montane forests of the Himalayas. You get the idea, abominable snowman, he lives up in the snow. Nobody lives in the snow. There's nothing to eat there. They live in the upper valleys, and you see them occasionally as they cross from one valley to the other by going over a mountain, the snow part of it. Okay, now the Almas also live in the lower montanes, but they're more flexible. They also seem to be the smartest, and this is not to say they're anything like us. They're just very smart animals. The Almas are. I think they're going to prove out to be living Neanderthals. The evidence is strong that the Almas are living in the jungles of the world. That jungle band that goes through South America, Central Africa, and Indonesia, that area. They, of the four, have reddish, russet-colored hair, like orangutans, which also live exclusively in jungles around the world. The others have dark browns and blacks, their body hair, covered with hair. Whenever anyone sees them, their characteristics are described consistently the same. Wherever in the world, whatever kind we're looking at, when the person sees it, and frequently this is some very, very isolated native who doesn't even know that the rest of the world is out there, much less that these things are seen on other continents. And when they describe them, they always describe them the same way. They say, no forehead, huge brow ridges, big round deep-set eyes, big flat nose, although this one isn't so big, but big flat nose up against their face, mouth sticking off their face, no chin, head tucked down into their torso, very long arms dangling around their knees, very thick, muscular, robust bodies, and covered with hair from head to toe. Now, take away the hair, and what did I just describe to you to a T? The pre-humans. Am I right? You saw the skeletons. You saw the bones. The pre-humans. What does this lead us to believe? The pre-humans are the hominoids. The hominoids are the pre-humans. The pre-humans are the pre-hominoids. It's their ancestors, not ours. It's clear to anybody that will look at the evidence. The so-called pre-humans are, in fact, pre-hominoids. Now, it's easy for me to stand up here and say this. What's the proof? Well, let's start right here with their feet. They leave tracks. All around the world they leave tracks. We have upwards of 10,000 or more photographed, plaster casted, or both. No question about it. And guess what? They're all fakes. All of them. Every one of them is a fake. Problem being, it's not that they are really in fact fakes. They just can't be real. They can't be real because not only is Darwin a blowed up peckerwood, all of his followers are. And they don't want to be that. So these cannot be real, even though they are. Now, is it possible that they could all be fakes? All these tracks could be fakes? Could they fool everybody? No. Why? Because we know a lot about it. Let's take a look. There's a science called ichnology. And what an ichnologist does is he studies the tracks left in fossils by creatures going millions of years back. Show them a fossil, they can look at a print or a track or anything. They can tell you what made it. There's a whole science to it. If you go back into prehistory, all of our primitive tribes, the one thing you had to pass on to your children was how to read the tracks in the area and know what they were, so that they could feed their family out of the environment and so they could keep from feeding some wild animal's family. Very important. If you took everything we knew about, remember Tonto and those Indians, boy, they could just smell a track and tell you 20 things about what made it. We know about tracks. And this is two of the basic things we know. That when any living fleshy foot, like a human foot or a hominoid foot or even a camel pad, it doesn't matter, makes a track, puts a track down, the subtle interaction of bones in the foot, in our case it's 26 bones, 33 joints, dozens of muscles, ligaments, and tendons, makes a very subtle movement and lays it down in a very specific way from the midline out. And so it leaves a distinctive print with little lines in here called compression lines. Next slide. When you do it with a fake foot, you don't get that subtlety of movement because there's no sequential parts to a fake foot. If you're missing a foot and you need a prosthesis, you're going to get just a dull stiff foot. We cannot duplicate anything even close to it. anything even close to a real foot. So whether this is plaster or rubber or plastic or wood, it doesn't matter. If you're making a fake foot, it's going to be of a piece, and so when you put it down into the medium, you have to stamp it or press it as a whole, and in doing so, you get a very distinctive look to that, and it's a little ridge here with cracks on the top and the outside. That's an impact ridge. So we have compression lines and impact ridges. Now, I can give this little lesson to a class of first graders, lay down a bunch of tracks here, real and fake, give them a magnifying glass, and they will not miss one. They will not miss one. Now, forest rangers that make their living out telling you, bear, elk, zebra, it doesn't matter. Whatever it is, they can tell you what it is. And no anthropologist will question their expertise. But if they see a hominoid track and they say, oh, boy, that looks real to me too, the anthropologist say, well, you don't know what you're talking about there. You don't know what you're talking about there. That one's fake. You're wrong there. See how absurd it is? And for the most part, you believe it because you don't expect them to lie to you. You don't expect them to have an agenda that they're maintaining. But they do, and keep it in mind. Okay, next slide. All right, this is the way a human foot works. Looks and works. This is, of course, a good foot, not a flat foot. This is a typical human foot with an arch. When we come down on our heel, we have to swing our momentum around the arch, then cut it over into the ball, which will regenerate some of the lost momentum, and then we come out thrusting off of our big toe. That's how we walk. Our smaller toes pull up and act as balancers. If you notice your feet tonight when you walk around, notice how that works. Your big toe will go down, your other toes will pull up, and it will leave in making a medium an undisturbed ridge of medium here, in making a track rather, an undisturbed ridge of medium right here, but this, of course, will be squashed. Very distinctive print, no question about it. Now, guess what? We walk badly. Badly. When you do time and motion studies of us walking, we're keeling around as we're swinging our momentum through our feet. We're locking our knees. We're basically throwing ourselves through our hips. That's why our joints wear out as we age. Our knees and our hips. We're using them badly. We walk badly. Whoever designed us needed to go back to the drawing board a couple of times more. They got lazy. It was a mistake. Okay, with that in mind, next slide. Let's take a look at a hominoid track, typical hominoid track. This is Bigfoot, 16 inches long, but taken in that really nice powdery dirt you get at the end of a hot summer, so it's a very clear, distinct print. Notice, if you will, the differences. We have a midline about right here, ankle shifted very far forward, heel extended back here and very much widened, forefoot shortened very much and widened, all 5 toes looking about the same shape, ironically, square, and all 5 toes acting as balancers because you have medium all the way through here. So you're getting the forefoot thrust coming out completely of the ball area, which is dented in, and it's like a 2-part motion, sort of. So they have a completely different foot. It's a completely redesigned foot. Why? Completely redesigned creature. Much bulkier, much heavier, much denser, much more robust. So you need a different kind of foot. No arch is going to support that kind of weight, so you have no arch. Now, the funny thing about most real, quote, fake tracks is that the local yokels who make them make big human footprints and go out stamping those around. So, immediately, they don't even have sense enough to know you got to do it, make a completely different foot. But the main thing to notice here is, remember, in our motion, we walk here, we go here, we do this, and we're very awkward. Look at the line of thrust here. Straight shot. What does this tell us? He walks right. He does it better than us. He does it the way it's supposed to be done. He or she does it the way it's supposed to be done. Isn't that interesting? Next slide. Okay, this is something else that the best hominoid tracks have. Dermal ridges. Now, it's kind of hard to see, but dermal ridges are your fingerprints on your feet. Fingerprints on your feet. This is why they take a baby's footprint when it's born. Finger's too small to deal with, just stick its foot on. Same thing. Individual, unique. The point is that whoever's faking these things out around the world, thousands of them, is taking the trouble to make articulating feet that if they would just put on the market, they could make a fortune in the prosthetics industry. So, you with me? It's a conspiracy to end all conspiracies, this making the hominoid track conspiracies. What I'm trying to get you to see is that is in fact absurdity piled on absurdity that they're asking you to believe. And again, for the most part, you do believe that. Most people who came in here today probably believed everything that the tabloids have to say about the hominoids. Problem being, if the hominoids are real, what does it mean? We are off the flowchart of natural life on Earth, and they don't want that to happen. Neither science nor religion. So in this instance, they hold hands and walk down the path together. Okay, next slide. All right, check this again. Comparison, Bigfoot track, plaster cast, human foot, just to get this in shape in your mind again. Next slide. All right, another pair of hominoid tracks, as you can see. These are so grungy looking on the soles because they were taken out of clay as opposed to dirt, as you saw earlier. But in every other way, they're hominoid tracks, are they not? We found, they're found together, so we assume it's a male and a female, like the two that we saw walking along at the Laetoli tracks. Right? Would everybody agree? This is as hominoid as it gets, right? Wrong! Guess what these are? Neanderthals. These are Neanderthal tracks, absolutely and without doubt. Torriano, Italy, a cave 30,000 years ago. Neanderthal artifacts all over the place. Neanderthals. Bona fide. Now, what does this tell us? It tells us that the Neanderthals, for sure, are hominoids because they got hominoid feet stuck on them. Plus, they got hominoid heads stuck, as you saw from the skulls. Furthermore, we can assume, I think, fairly, that every one of the ones we saw earlier, all the way back to Lucy, 4 million years worth, had feet just like this and were, in fact, hominoids. The track you saw at Laetoli, remember the one down in the corner? It looked a heck of a lot like that, didn't it? The hominoids are the prehumans. That's the point I keep trying to make. Now, I'm extrapolating a little bit here. I'm taking a little risk because we don't have the feet nor the prints of any other prehuman. We just have to go with logic. But guess what we do have? We do have the feet of Neanderthals. Next slide. Here we go. Neanderthal foot, human foot, Neanderthal. Can everybody see this down at the bottom? I'm sorry, it's kind of low. Take a look so you can see. Stand up if you have to, be like a football game. All right, here's the deal. Notice there's no comparison. Look at the heel bone of the Neanderthal relative to our little nub of the heel bone. Look where our ankle base joint is as opposed to this huge. This is it. This is bone here. This is our little base joint compared to this giant base joint here and the squeeze forward of it. Notice, if you will, the great foreshortening of the forefoot and the widening of it relative to ours. Look at the skew. You can see the skew in the foot. See how squared up and solid that is, like a rock. Look how much our big toe dominates our little four toes and how much these are much the same. This thing is built for balance, for solidity, for stability. We got a crummy foot, folks. Crummy foot and a crummy walk. We ought to complain to the boss about this. You can see why this thing walks so smoothly. It's just kabloom, boy. It's just perfect for maintaining balance and stability, carrying all that heavy bulk and weight. Good design, bad design. Next slide. Okay, if I'm right, they're out there, all these places. Where are they? All right, let's take a look at the world. Take away the deserts. Take away the tundra, and what you're left with is arable land. Arable land. All right? This is where they live, in the black parts. The heavy, dense, deep forests and jungles of the world. This is where we live. The nice, cool, open areas. The pinks, the blues, and the purples. The primo niches. That's us. All right? Now, broken down, that is 55% for us, 45% for them, moving toward 40% for them. As you know, we're cutting down forests like crazy. It used to be 55% for them, 45% for us, 500 years ago, approximately. Okay, so you look at this and you say, well, wait a minute, we're sitting right here in the desert. We live everywhere. No, we live in most of these environments, but we don't live, for the most part, up in these areas. in the Himalayas and here and in these jungles. If we live in the jungles, we live on the river. We don't live in the heart of darkness. When we have to live in the heart of darkness, what do? We cut it down. We'll cut roads through here, but we don't live in it, where we've got to hack our way through every day to go to school or to the store. Just isn't going to happen. We're not physically designed for that. Our skin won't take it. If we didn't have clothes and couldn't defeat the natural order of things, if you were to strip everybody in this room naked and put us out there to live like everybody else has to live, most of us would be dead in a few weeks from radiation poisoning. Those of us who have black skin would have a chance to make it to the equator, but couldn't stay and live in cold climates. We're not physically adapted to this planet. Understand that. Our skin does not let us go except in certain niches, the primo niches. So, understand too that we think we live in every one of the nooks and crannies out there. We are masters of all we survey. That's what we're told all the time. We're humans. We're masters of all we survey. We do not even survey all that we claim to be masters of. It will surprise you to know that of the United States alone, fully 25%, 1/4, has never once been foot surveyed because it's just too hard to get in there and do the work. We survey from the air those areas. We do not go. We're not as tough as we think we are. Now, also understand that the hominoids are not just restricted to these areas. They move wherever there are forests. These are their real stomping grounds. But they go anywhere that there are forests. They use forests like highways because they are migratory animals. They migrate. They do not hibernate. They move with the seasons. And they use forests as their highways. As they live in the forests, they do a split shift with the bears. Bears work the day shift, they work the night shift. It is. It's how it works. Also understand that of the 5,000 quality sightings that we have in the United States and Canada, now I'm not talking just, skimpy ones. I'm talking good quality sightings, 5,000 in the last 50 years, half have been east of the Mississippi River. Every state has them, except possibly Nevada, maybe the mountains north. We have them in Louisiana, down in the swamps, the little one. It's called rougarou. When I was a little boy growing up, don't you get too far from the house, rougarou will get you. The little red man of the woods, the booger man, boogeyman. Excuse me, booger man, right. Slip of the tongue. Anyway, Florida has the skunk ape. New Jersey has the Jersey Devils. Arkansas, everywhere has them. I bet you every one of you have heard stories about this from your state. They're everywhere. And it's the same around the world. They share the planet with us. Okay, next slide. So, you say to me, well, okay, by George, we're humans. Why don't we just go out there and get one? Even so, we can do anything. Why don't we just mount up and go get one if there's so many of them out there? All right, panda's a perfect example of what the problem is. The panda was last century's hominoids. Rumors would come out of China of this black and white bear that ate bamboo. And, of course, every PhD in the world sitting behind his little desk does not even have to get his fanny up out of the chair to say, well, forget that. We know they have black bears. We know they have brown bears. We know they have white bears. But they're all carnivores. No vegetarian bears. You kidding us? Ridiculous. And then in 1869, a French naturalist goes to Sichuan province, China, and sees the hide of a freshly killed one hanging on the wall, and he knows they're real. So every zoo and museum mounts up the expeditions that you would like to see mounted up today to go out to find the next panda and bring it in. Serious. Now we're talking Sichuan province, an area the size of the state of Arizona, very mountainous, hilly terrain, difficult terrain, covered with bamboo rather than woods, but in every other respect like the environment that hominoids will be found in. How long do you think it took those teams? And this is back in the 1800s where people really knew their way around the woods. How long do you think it took? 60 years. Now, it sounds like a gross exaggeration, and it is. They only looked for about 30 years. This is where Ivy made the mistake. They only looked for about 30 years, and then they gave it up. And they said it has to be extinct now. And then 30 years later, Teddy Roosevelt's sons are out there doing some sport hunting, and they kill one. Okay? So then they mounted up again, knowing that it's for real now. And because they had learned so much in the interim, they began to get them. And over the next 20 years, they brought in 6. And we have the panda craze, that we have today. But even to this day, they're extremely difficult to go out into the wilds of Sichuan province, China, and bring in a wild panda. Now, what is the panda doing that makes it so difficult to get one? Well, as you can see, it's very brightly colored and stands out very distinctively against its green background. It lives during the day. It eats a very restricted diet, bamboo. It's very slow-moving. You see them move in zoos. They're as stupid as a bag of hammers. They can't even reproduce in zoos. Can't even find each other or figure it out. I mean, how stupid do you have to be? Anyway, the point is, they're not doing anything. They're living their lives, and the problem lies with us. We can't hack it in their world very easily. We think we're masters again of the world. We're not. We're not. And where they live is where the hominoids live. And the hominoids are bigger, faster, stronger, operate at night, eat anything in their world. They can hear better, see better, and I'm absolutely sure think better than we can.
Folks, I need to interject at this point that this point in his discussion, he's talking about the niches that the Bigfoots live in, and that's going to relate to the video that I put out with John Miozinski. These two videos go hand in hand. John Miozinski's video about the niche and the eating habits, and they go hand in hand with each other. You really need to put both of these videos together if you want to fill your head with some good, solid knowledge about these creatures.
We're not going to just mount up and go get one because we've tried it many times and it hasn't worked. We're only going to see them by accident, encounter them by accident. And that's when it happens, and it happens a lot. We have good evidence on record of these encounters. Next slide. We're going to go over a few. The famous Patterson film. Roger Patterson took a film of a female hominoid walking along a creek bank in 1967, October. There's no doubt that this is a bona fide film for a number of reasons we're going to go over. All right. First of all, it was a bright sunny day, as you can see. What happened was the sun was shining such that it was glinting off of her shoulder and thigh as she walked, and you could see her muscles rippling in her shoulder, in her thigh as she walks. If that's a person in a suit, the suit has to be glued to naked skin. In the gluing process, you lose that flexibility, that ripple. The only thing that looks like this does in this film is real skin over real muscle working. So we could stop right here. It's real just based on that. Right there. But we don't have to stop. The arm, if you've all seen her walk, she walks along like this. She drags her arm down around her knees where everybody says, the hominoids do. Why? The elbow articulates right here, which is much longer from shoulder to elbow than a human. If that's a human in a suit, impossible. You can't get an elbow bend at the same point. So we could stop right there. Solid proof that that's not a human being in a suit. But furthermore, Jerry Romney, the guy they said was in the suit, they stuck him with breasts. What would they do that for? Why go to the problem? Why go to the trouble? As she walks along and she turns back to face him, you see the breasts sway, and she takes a couple of steps, and you see that nice jiggle that we all know. If it's a person in a suit in 1967, it's going to be those early silicone jobs. Remember those? Absolutely real right there. Furthermore, she left tracks in the hard-packed sand of the creek bed. 1 inch deep. We have pictures. We have casts. That cast you saw earlier of the cast in the foot, that was her foot. No question, inch deep, walked a 200-pound man beside her not long after. He sank about 1/4 of an inch. So we know that as she stood there doing this, she weighed 600 to 800 pounds. Fake that. That's got to be a real lead-lined suit. 600 to 800 pounds as she walks. So we know that it was a legitimate film. Furthermore, as they pointed out in the program, with the fake films, they can never tell you where it happened and who did it, who took it, because they don't want that guy to be grilled and they don't want experts to go and measure one limb here and know how tall it really was. Well, what Patterson did was he went right out fast as he could and begged every expert in the area that he could call, every anthropologist and zoo person, come out, bona fide sighting, please bring dogs. And you don't want to bring dogs because these things have a very powerful body odor that even tracking dogs will recoil from. If it's a person in a suit, it's like the suit's not even there. The dogs are after it. Patterson did, of course, no expert came. Needless to say, they never do. You can't get them to go because they know what will happen. A young man named Grover Krantz went out early in his career as an anthropologist, took a look at one, and he said, it looks real to me. And it's 30-some-odd years later, and I think he's still trying for tenure. They've made a tremendous example out of Grover Krantz for what happens to people who side with the enemy. In this issue, which is a very volatile, very sensitive issue. Okay? So no experts would come, needless to say. Patterson did everything right that he could except film something that could be real. Other than that, he was great.
I would like to take this opportunity to direct you to a friend of mine's YouTube channel where he is working exclusively on the Patterson-Gimlin film. And he is making clarity adjustments to this film that will blow your mind. His YouTube channel is just about this film and his restoration of it and the clarification of it and the technologies used to clean it up. So please do yourself a favor, subscribe to his YouTube channel, because you are going to want to watch all of the things that are uncovered in this film.
Okay, next slide. A man named Albert Ostman, picture taken in 1957, talking about an event that occurred to him 33 years earlier in 1924 when he was a young man, a timber cruiser in the woods of southern British Columbia. He's taking some time off. He's out looking for gold mines, lost gold mines. He's sleeping in his sleeping bag one night, and suddenly Big Hand picks him up, shoves him to the bottom of the bag, slings him over its back like Santa's bag of toys, and scoops up his camp stores with the other hand and walks off with him. He is captured by a Bigfoot. He has marched for about an hour. He's got barely enough room at the top of the bag to breathe. The hand couldn't get quite around the bag, so he had enough room to breathe, but he stuck down the bottom of it. It dumps him out an hour later or so, and he's in a 10-acre basin of high rock walls where he can't get out, and there's one opening opposite where he is, and over there is the den of the living quarters of the male Bigfoot that got him, his mate, and their two offspring, a young male and a young female. And Albert Ostman stays with them for 6 days before he can figure out a way to escape, which is very funny, very clever. Not going to go into it. Takes too long to tell. It's in the book, okay? But he gets away. The point of the story is not how funnily he escapes, but that he doesn't tell anybody for 33 years. Keeps it to himself, thinking everybody would think he was crazy, which they would do. And then in 1957, he reads an affidavit in a paper by a man who saw one picking berries, and the man said, if anybody has an experience like this, would you share it with me? So Ostman writes him a letter and says, this is what happened to me. Well, when people found out what happened to him, the roof fell in on the poor guy. Experts came in from all over the world. He had to take lie detector tests up the wazoo. You know how it works. And so you know that when you're telling a story, a long, detailed story, and it's a lie, you can't keep the details straight. You're going to goof it up, and they're going to figure it out sooner or later you're telling a lie. He never goofed up. He passed all his lie detector tests. No, anybody that had anything to do with him, just read the testimonies, say he was absolutely A+ straight-up guy, telling a true story. Next slide. The famous Minnesota Iceman. Ice Child is more like it. This was a juvenile Bigfoot killed by a man named Frank Hansen in the woods of northern Minnesota. Ironically, in 1967, the same year that Patterson filmed his Bigfoot 2,000 miles away. All right, now, Frank Hansen shot it in the back, blew out that nice hole in its chest, dropped it, severed its spine, dropped it down. It pulled its arm up to protect its face from him, as you can imagine, shot it through the wrist, through the left eye, blew the right eye out onto its cheek, and blew out the back of its head. Coup de grace, killed it dead. At that moment, 1967, Frank Hansen could have changed history. He could have taken this thing, crammed it down the throats of science, and we would not be having this discussion today. We would all accept hominoids as a reality from that point forward. No problem. But Frank Hansen was not that kind of man. The kind of man he was, he saw the opportunity, he bought a 7-foot floor freezer, he threw the body in there, he filled it up with water, he froze it, he put a piece of plate glass over it, and he took it around to shopping malls and county fairs for about 12 years, from about 1978 to, about 1968 to about 1980. Did anybody here besides me see it when it was out? There's always people that saw it. Okay, so they can tell you that it was the real deal. Okay? Now, what you saw if you went and paid your buck to see it was this thing laid out, and you could see it's kind of snowy, milky ice right here, but where you could see it was like glass, it was like air. It was clear. You know how ice can be. So, you could see very clearly that this was an ex-living dead thing laying in front of you. But don't take my word for it. Take the word of a man named Ivan Sanderson. When Frank Hansen was trying to get publicity for this, he allowed Ivan Sanderson, a true zoologist and a great cryptozoologist, to study this thing for 3 full days. Very powerful lights, the whole works. And Sanderson wrote this tremendously detailed technical report about it, much of which I quote in the book. You read that, you will know the man knew what he was looking at from a technical zoology standpoint. I'm looking at it just with layman's eyes when I'm a young man, but they're perfect eyes, astronaut eyes. So I'll tell you what I saw. What you could see, what anybody could see, because the knees were almost to the top of the glass, is that every hair, you know how hair floats in water? This is not our hair, this is primate hair, 2 to 3 inches long. It's sticking off, it's like a pincushion off its body. You can see right down to its skin wherever you look. And wherever you look, you're looking at what amounts to a small pencil lead hair, round, tucking into a pore, perfectly tightly round. Wherever you look, millions of them, wherever you look. Now, what we're told is this was just a wax and rubber dummy made up by a charlatan who was out to just take advantage of people, right? Ask anybody who works in the wax museum business, and they'll tell you the one thing you can't do well is hair, because to get the hair right, you got to punch it in with a tool, and you got to pull that tool out, and it's going to leave a little nick mark around the hair. None of that in this creature. None. But the thing that really impressed me the most, and I'm sure everybody else will verify this, is, you know when you kill a deer or something, you let it bleed out, but for a long time after it oozes that pink kind of fluid. You scrape your elbow, for women who don't deer hunt, scrape your elbow, you know, and after a while you're still oozing that pink sticky stuff. Well, it was still doing that when he froze it, when he put the water in. So as the water was freezing, that stuff was coming up in tendrils, ribbons, pink ribbons of that sticky, oozy stuff, coming out of every wound, out of there, out of the mouth, out of the nose. You know when you have a traumatic head injury, you bleed out of your nose and your mouth as well, out of both eye sockets, out of the wrist. Little pieces of bone were sticking out of the wrist. Every one of those, and those ribbons went from down as deep in the holes as they could get up to the surface, and they spread out in little pools, little circles at the top of the ice. Now, I defy anybody making a fake to even think to do that, much less pull it off and make it look so real. This was the real deal. Next slide. Perhaps the most interesting story of them all, Zana from Russia, an Alma. Remember I told you that the Almas were also man-sized, 5 to 7 feet tall, 300, 600 pounds, and they're dominant in Russia and the Orient? This is Alma, the living Neanderthal. This is one of them right here. This is Zana is an Alma, was an Alma. Now, understand this. In the Orient, the tradition when one of these things is captured, for whatever reason, was to kill it immediately. Desiccate its body and sell its body parts for medicine, principally aphrodisiacs. That's the Oriental tradition. In the Russian area, though, when they would be captured, male or female, they would be used as slaves. Physical slaves. Held, spirits broken in these primitive villages where they would be, and they would be used to carry wood, fetch water, do the haying, all the heavy work nobody really wants to do. Make the slave do it. And so that became their fate. And for females, another aspect of it was they had to become the sex slaves of the men of the area. And that was one of the other great advantages to having a female. And so this is the fate that befell Zana in about 1850. She was captured as an adult in 1850. We do not know how old she was. She was an adult. She was taken to the village of Takina, where they kept her in a hole for about 3 years until her spirit was broken enough to let her wander around. She was dependent on them for food, and then they began to train her to fetch wood, fetch water, do the things that she had to do. And she became like the village pet for 40 years. She died in 1890. Now, how do we know this? Because in the Orient and Russia, they don't have the same tradition that we have. They're very old countries. They've been living with this for a very long time, for centuries. They know they're real. They send researchers out taking information about it. They send teams out trying to find them, or they used to when Russia had money. They don't now. But this was done in the mid-1970s. Excuse me, I'm sorry, mid-1960s. This research was done in the mid-60s. So, in the mid-1960s, this was an area of Kazakhstan where she lived, where people live very long lives. You know those places in the world where people live up around 120 years old? So they had over 100 people above the age of 80 that had known her quite well in their youth. There were 10 still alive who had attended her funeral. So they were able to get tremendous corroborative evidence, corroborative testimony about her lifestyle, and everything about her from all these different people, so we have an amazing view of what she was like and what her life was like. Again, a lot of which I go over in the book. But the main thing is that she never learned to speak, but she learned the language. They could talk to her and she'd know what they meant. And while there, she gave birth 8 times to hybrids with men of the village. 8 times. Killed the first 4 accidentally because her kind apparently washes the newborn off immediately. She would take it to the freezing glacial river that ran through the village, and because they had so much human in them, it would kill them. So the last 4, the village women took them from her at birth and raised them on their own because they looked so human, and every pair of hands was very valuable in one of those primitive villages like that, and so they raised them up and they became Russian citizens. Married, had children. Her great-grandchildren are alive in Russia to this day. I know, it's an amazing story. Now, what do people say about her children? Well, everybody said that they were indeed taller than most, bigger than most, a little more robust than most, but not giants, not superhumans, just strong, you know, big and strong people. Darker skinned than most, but not truly Negroid. Hair like, you know, everybody, but not covered in hair like she was. Average intelligence, not wizards, not stupid. Ugly enough to make a freight train take a dirt road. Unfortunately for them. But they could speak. That's the key. They could all speak. They had very high-pitched voices, but they could speak, which allowed them to integrate into the community as humans, even though they were clearly not quite humans. So the researchers were real excited to get all this information. It's like, wow. And they knew where she was buried. She was buried in the village cemetery. Unfortunately, this is a Muslim area. They don't mark gravestones there. So they knew she was in the village cemetery, which had existed for centuries, and they couldn't say just where because of the 10 people that were alive. They all had different memories of where it had been. Who knew that 70, 80 years later somebody was going to care? So they couldn't decide. They couldn't, and they would have had to bulldoze the whole thing. The village wouldn't let them do that. So somebody says, well, guess what? Her youngest son, Kvit, died in 1954, only 10 years prior to this study. So they said, we know where he is. We'll let you dig him up. So, boy, they dug him up. Her youngest son, Kvit. Now, before we look at his skull, I want to say again, remember, Neanderthals had bigger brains than we did, and they carry them, and they carry them in a bun in the back of their head called the occipital bun. All right, let's take a look at Kvit's skull. Here you go, right here. Notice, if you will, that's a remnant of an occipital bun right there. Notice how much of a forehead he doesn't have. Look at the size of these brow ridges. Look at that eye socket. Is it starting to look familiar? Look at the size of that nasal passage. Look at the size of these teeth. Look at the size of that jawbone. Look at the size of the cheekbone. But look at that chin. Allows him to speak. This is an ugly dude, kids. This is a Neanderthal, basically. This is a guy you do not want to meet in a dark alley. Now, what, of course, anthropologists say is that he is an extreme variation on the human norm. An extreme, real extreme variation on the human norm. But that's how they explain it. Okay, I ask you to take my word for it. Hominoids are real. They live with us today. They have always lived with us. It is their planet. They are the native, indigenous, upright walking primate of planet Earth. There was a split somewhere between the down on all four primates and the up on 2 feet primates, but we're not the one. The pre-humans are the pre-hominoids. Go with me on that.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, if you stayed with me this far, I sure appreciate it. I don't know about you, but I live for this type of information. That's why I bought the book. The book is very detailed, and you can gain a lot more knowledge by having the book in your possession than the video. But I mean, I live for this. These are the kind of information nuggets that help me piece together what we're going after and what we're looking for and how to understand them better. I mean, and I'm glad you guys are here with me. Please share if you can, share if you will. Subscribe, like, comment. Let me know what you think. I appreciate each and every one of you. Thank you so much.